Hey guys, Sherm here, and today I'm going to be showing you the Golden Maxed Lotus Evija in multiplayer in Asphalt 9. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and enjoy the video. Thank you to ProFlash for these races. I will put a link to his channel in the description. His car has all upgrades and epic import parts applied, so we'll get to see this car at its highest performance. Now keep in mind that these races were recorded during rush season, so the competition isn't quite as good as it was in the season geared specifically toward this car, but there's still some pretty good races. So there has been a lot of debate about just where this car fits in the top of Class B, because RPM Alex made a video comparing it, the Apollo N, and the Huracan, and the general consensus is that the Evija and the Huracan are basic joint kings of Class B, with the Evija winning on the longer and straighter ones, and the Huracan winning on the shorter and twistier runs. So it's hard to definitively say which one of those is the real king of the class, and the Apollo N is possibly still the king on some of the very longest tracks, such as Mountain Poles and Frozen Route, because it does have a few miles per hour higher top speed than the Evija. But for the most part, the Evija and the Huracan are going to be your two top cars for B-class events. But it's quite a bit of a different story for multiplayer with this car. So as we've been going through the cars in each class to create our best and worst cars in each class lists, one list for event and one list for multiplayer for each class, we found that the Evija isn't necessarily second place or even in the top 3 in multiplayer. I'm not going to tell you right now where this car sits, but you'll find out hopefully on Saturday when we finally release that video, just in time before the update presumably comes next week. I have taken into account the nerf of the Corvette Grand Sport and the buffs of the Sinar 1 and 4GT in my calculations for those lists, and thank you to everyone who helped me work on them. So let's talk about the car itself a little bit. I said in my previous video about this car, I believe at 4 stars, that it was basically supposed to be a middle ground between the Huracan and the Apollo, with having a better top speed than the Huracan but worse other stats, and having a slightly worse top speed than the Apollo but better other stats. So presumably it should do better on the middle ground tracks, but the thing is the Apollo isn't so much faster than this car that it actually allows it to beat it on many tracks. Did that make sense? It made sense in my head at least. So a lot of people were wanting me to make a video about the Evija special event, and the reason why I didn't was there wasn't really a whole lot in particular to talk about. There wasn't anything really special about the event that made it stand out from any other event, aside from just being harder and even more pay to win than all of the other special events besides the Jesco. And the only real big thing that I would have to say about it was that you needed to gold max a bunch of cars, a lot of the ones needed for the event actually, in order to get the car even. And for the final stage, I think it was free try, but I gave up on the event so early on that I never actually made it to the final stage after all. And I talked a lot about it in other videos as well, and I just didn't feel like it warranted its own video. Let's get back to the race at hand. Thankfully, this Huracan does not 360 flash as he passes by him, even though he probably could. It's always nice to see in multiplayer when people really respect you when you're next to them and don't try to knock you down. And if I'm next to you in multiplayer just going along, I'm not going to 360 you either, so you can be safe about that. But if you 360 me in that case, well, then I'm going to come for you later. I think the thing about the Evija that doesn't make it feel like an especially great car to drive, nor makes it especially amazing in multiplayer, is because it simply doesn't really have many standout features, if any at all. Like, the speed, while being one of the best in B class, isn't especially amazing. The acceleration is 81, which is, I suppose, better than average, but still not great, and the handling and nitro are around average-ish as well. And it just feels kind of meh to drive. Afik said when he had this car at 5 out of 6 stars, he didn't really like driving, and that's just 1 star away from maxed out. And at maxed out, it's probably not terribly better than 5 star, so it's kind of one of those cars that's technically really good, but only if you can drive it properly, and you won't really have a whole lot of fun while doing it. Now we've got a race on Osaka, a twistier track against a pretty much maxed out Huracan. Now again, this is rush season, so you can understand how the competition is. If this was in a more skill-based season, this race would be a lot closer with a car like the Huracan, probably neck and neck a lot of the way throughout it. And the Huracan would probably beat it on this track, honestly. If you guys have not checked my community tab recently, I made a post there saying that at 30,000 subscribers, I would make a special Q&A session with my girlfriend. So if you have any questions for either of us, be sure to go check that out and post any questions that you might have. I won't be able to answer all of them, and there is a channel in the Discord for this as well, by the way, but I'm definitely going to try to collect the best questions, the ones that most people ask, so that the majority of you will get answers to your questions as long as they were appropriate. So we're coming up near the end of this race, and at the end of this specific variant of Osaka, I tend to wreck more on these little things in the middle of the road than I do on any other place on any other track. It's happened more times than I'd like to admit. There was also a Techeart 1896 in this race. If you would like to see how that car performs in multiplayer, I have put a video out about it very recently, and I will have a video of a 6-star 1896 up pretty soon as well, hopefully. So you guys remember how in my previous video, I called this car the rich man's VLF? Well, we've got a couple of VLFs in this race, so we can really see how it does do against them. And at the beginning, it's pretty close. But then Flash begins to pull away. I've noticed that most of the videos that I do about max 6-star cars in rush season where it's not terribly competitive, like the main point of the video is then more to show just how the car itself is. Like just seeing what you can really do with the car itself when it's at a really high level. This was pretty much what the video I made about the 6-star Sheeran that Afik had a while back was. Now I don't usually do these kinds of multiplayers very often, but when I do, that's kind of what I'm thinking about while making them. The vast majority of them are still going to be made up of some of the best and most competitive races that I had in that car, because I know that that gives you the best idea of how the car does against other ones that you probably will see around it in multiplayer when you've got a bunch of people around the same skill level, and it makes for a more interesting video as well, I think. So Flash does take the victory in this race, with the two VLFs actually coming in second and third position, and a bunch of other cars, including a Corvette, coming further back. Now this next race here is against a McLaren 570S, a very good McLaren 570S, mind you, and 4 Corvettes. So I guess this race is more like what you would have found in the Evija season, just really close competition. I think it would be pretty fun to see a skill-based multiplayer season that had all of the top B and A class cars in them, so people could choose whichever ones they wanted out of those to do the best they could and get as high as they could. It would be really interesting to see which cars people actually chose up toward the end of the season when it was getting very difficult to gain rating, because a lot of the high-end A and B class cars are actually fairly similar, and I don't actually know what I would choose most of the time. That'd be a really interesting thing to see if GameLoft were to do that. I imagine that the majority of cars in there would probably be Huayras and Huracans, because those are the ones that are just really agile and that a lot of people have maxed and that they know very well. But we'd probably see the occasional 1896 or a Perta at really high stars, and it'd just be really cool to see how the people that managed to get those cars at high stars could then do against other high-end cars in their classes in real competitive multiplayer situations. And maybe an S-Class skill season as well, because of the people that spent 20,000 tokens or whatever to get the Jesco, they really haven't gotten much use out of it except for the S-Class Elite events, which it undoubtedly does really good in. I just think that there should be more multiplayer situations for people to show what they can do with that car. Now in this final race against a bunch of Corvettes on Caribbean, it is time for me to give my general review of the Lotus Evija at Golden Max, and it probably is not actually worth it to have gotten this car in the event, and let me explain that. It would have taken you probably 15,000 tokens or something to even be able to unlock this car in the event, and if you wanted to get it to a point where it was actually competitive, you'd probably have to spend another 15,000 tokens on it. And the thing is, it's not really even better in any substantial way than the Huracan and the Apollo, which I know a lot of people already have maxed or very close to it. So I really don't think the event was worth it for this car, and the reason why I think the Techeart event was quite a bit more worth it was that it was still more skill-based, and a lot of people did manage to get it without spending tokens. Now, the people that did have to spend a lot of tokens to get it still spent a lot less tokens to get it at higher stars than it would have taken for the Evija, for example, which was like, I spent 11,000 to get it 4-starred, whereas I would have had to spend way more than that to even unlock the Evija. And we believe the 1896 is the new A-Class King for multiplayer, probably about 3rd best for events. Thanks to Flash for these races, thank you all for watching, please like the video if you have enjoyed, and consider subscribing for more Asphalt and other games content, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye!